Hello, and welcome to our series, Conversations on Zionism, Reclaiming the Narrative. I'm Russell Robinson, Chief Executive Officer of Jewish National Fund USA. The time has come to be the voice of what Zionism really is. We're exposing the beautiful and diverse facets and facts of Zionism. Join me on this journey, together with Conversations on Zionism, Reclaiming the Narrative. This is Zionism. Elisha Wiesel, my guest today, refers to himself as a recovering Wall Street executive, having retired from a 25-year career at Goldman Sachs. Upon his father, Elie Wiesel's passing, Elisha wanted his voice to continue. And so when opportunities arise, Elisha continues his father's legacy by standing up. Most recently, at the No Fear rally he organized in Washington, D.C. Please welcome Elisha Wiesel. Elisha, welcome to our show. It is such an honor and a pleasure. You obviously are a person who has had that unbelievable opportunity of being educated by a father, Elie Wiesel, who really gave us words, inspirations, visuals, thoughts about humanity and about evil against good and how we have to be good. Tell me a little bit about how does that, with you today, connect to Israel, to Judaism, and to Zionism?
First of all, I want to say thank you, Russell, for having me here. I'm so impressed by what JNF does, and it's such critical work, and I'm thrilled to be able to talk to you today. Look, you think about how, in some sense, I had it remarkably easy in terms of Jewish education. Talk about a yichus, a connection. Talk about having Jewish identity served to you on a silver platter. And even I, at age, call it from ages 16 to 22, I don't know, wanted nothing to do with Judaism, wanted to turn my back on it, was convinced that tribalism was bad, particularism was bad, couldn't we all just be part of one great big human family, and why is it so important that we keep this particular thing called Judaism alive? Even I got that confused and that lost on the derech with what my father had. So what an incredible challenge the world has today in terms of Jewish youth. Think about how many students are not having that experience, who don't have a family where they get to see what practiced Judaism is, what spoken Judaism is about, and leadership. So I had an incredible opportunity growing up. It came with some burdens, Russell, I'll be honest. There was a lot of pressure growing up. There was a lot of feeling like this was the way I had to go and I could never deviate from it. I went to an Orthodox yeshiva for 14 years, and I sensed always that there were many preconceptions of who I had to be solely as the son of my father. But thank God I had a few moments in life that opened my eyes and showed me what an incredible opportunity I had with an amazing father, with an amazing Jewish leader, and with an amazing people to be part of.
There's that moment, and we talk about leadership, we talk about people standing up, and you do relate it back to the burden that you had. And part of when we're even talking to young people today, if you talk about generations, sometimes they look at their parents who went to meetings, who took a lot of time away from the family doing what? Building a nation and organizations, a Jewish family service, being involved in the Jewish life. And it becomes almost, you try to think, is it a negative or a positive? But there's that moment where you start realizing, wow, I have a lot of lessons that I now need to relearn and then reteach. Was there a moment for you?
There were several moments. I want to riff for just a moment on what you said about this past generation building a nation, everything that those who immigrated into the United States had to do to keep their Judaism, help build up Israel. I actually think that for my generation, and really call it like half a generation before it, I think that's what the Soviet Jewry movement was. And the Soviet Jewry movement was an opportunity for political engagement for American Jews, for American Jewish youth to get activated, because here was a clear wrong. You couldn't figure out any other way to say other than the evil empire, the Soviet Union, was imprisoning Jews for no reason other than their Judaism. And a movement was built. And it took a while, but a movement was built. And I think that, I have a hypothesis. I don't know the data yet, but I have a hypothesis that that political activism, getting that outlet, probably did a lot for Yiddishkeit as well, and for Jewish learning. You asked me, though, what my moment was. I had really several moments. I think a big one for me was family. Meeting my cousin, Steve, who lives in Renana. He's, quite a bit older than me. This was a part of the family I hadn't seen for many years. But around the time that I was at college, he came to visit his parents who were in Riverdale. And all of a sudden, I had living Judaism not as something as remote as the generation above me. And remember, my parents were significantly older when they had me. I had a peer who was practicing Judaism in an incredible way, who was not only devout and orthodox and kept Shabbos and kept kosher, but was leading an incredible, military unit in the IDF and passionate about Israel and living his values every day. And really reconnecting with family was a major turning point for me.
So I'm going to take you back to the Soviet Jewry movement. It's an interesting piece because I made a comment on another show that we were having that if you're under 30, you probably don't even know what the Soviet Union is. But wasn't that a remarkable moment of Zionism? I mean, the movement of allowing freedom, that's all we were doing, to get people a choice, to make a choice if they wanted to be Jewish in a free place, wherever that may be. Isn't that really a remarkable moment of Zionism that we maybe haven't taught well?
To me, the Soviet Jewry movement is the first major activism period in my father's life. It is something that fills me with incredible pride. But I want to critique maybe one word you used, which is moment. And if I used it as well, I'm going to critique myself, because the Jews of Silence, which was my father's book after he went to go visit Jews in Russia in the 1960s, that was published in 1965. And the student-led movements for Soviet Jewry, I think SSJ, that was 1962, 1963. And in some of the conversations I've had recently around Zionism and political activism around youth, people are like, American Jewry doesn't care anymore, it doesn't matter, you're not getting people to turn out in the numbers that you need to stand for Israel and stand against anti-Semitism. I mean, we're never again going to have 250,000 people come together as they did at Freedom Sunday in 1987. But what's important for people to remember is it took 25 years for that to happen. It wasn't a moment. It's not like, Natan Sharansky and my father and all of the other gadol's who were involved in that snapped their fingers and it happened. It took 25 years to build that movement. So I think that it's also important for us to keep that context as we say to ourselves, oh, we're defeated, we don't have the drive, we don't have the energy today. These things take time and they take, consistent and concerted focus.
Here you talk about the Soviet Jewry movement and the 25 years it took to even awaken the world. And literally, for those in the audience that don't know, you have to read. The Soviet Jewry movement literally it's Russia on steroids. And it was brought down by a community called the Jewish community who fought for freedom. It was your father who stood there and talked about it in small gatherings of 5 and 10 before it was 250.
Correct.
1,000. And I think that conversation that you need to keep telling the story is that it doesn't start with 250,000 people. It starts with 5 people in an apartment.
And our muscles gotten weak. You know, I can't tell you how many conversations I have where people feel a certain sense of despair and exhaustion that the problem that our young Jews now face on college campuses, it's not as easily fixed as just handing them some index cards with talking points. I can't tell you how many people are like, oh, well, let's just give them the right talking points. It takes a lot more than that. That's just, that's just like one little piece of paper. What about the conversation you have the day after and the week after? It takes continued and concerted focus.
So you have been in investments in your, business and professional life, in information technology. Give us some tips on
Investments?
yeah, but it's an investment in our Jewish people, in our future. What would be some of those investments that we need to make that we're not making?
It's a great question. I can't claim to know the answers. All I can tell you is personal experience. And in some sense, the fact that I went to an Orthodox yeshiva for 14 years and ended up so anti, I will tell you that what ended up saving me in some sense was what I saw in the home. And what ended up giving me difficulties also was what I saw in the home. Because I believe that Judaism is passed on in the home, and you can send your kids to the Jewish school, and you can send your kids to the Jewish camp. And by the way, these things are amazing. Jewish day schools and Jewish camps are one of the bedrocks of what we've accomplished. But I don't think that they can accomplish what needs to be accomplished without what happens in the Jewish home. And that comes down to very simple basics. If you want your kids to grow up with a sense of what it means to daven, well, do you daven at home? If you want your kids to get a sense of what Shabbos is, well, do you keep Shabbos in any form at home? And I'm not saying that somebody who doesn't keep Shabbos at all needs to now go and, be from like Chabad to the nth degree. No, but do you have Friday night Kiddush? Do you bench Birkat HaMazon afterwards? Is there an opportunity to at least talk about what the Torah portion is? I find that so much of what has to be done with regards to Jewish identity needs to be anchored in the home. And the parts that I saw in my home, I tell you, I want to grow those now as an adult. And I think about what my father did and how I want to do more for my children. And the gaps where we didn't have some of those things, I feel like I was robbed of it. And I feel, frankly, a little bit of resentment. Why couldn't my mom and dad get to an agreement on this so I could learn what some of these things were a little bit more? So I find that that's the most important place to invest is in the home.
See, and there's an empowerment that we have to give people as well. And the empowerment is getting them to want to learn. And part of what we have in the Jewish community, and I'm going to hit on a little raw subject, except that your article, I think, was right. You helped during a time in which Israel was being attacked, which means Judaism was being attacked. And you stood up and helped organize a rally in Washington. And for the people that don't want to remember how the 25 years went to get 250,000 people, wrote an article as well. It was a poor showing. You wrote an article and said it wasn't everything that it could have been, but it was the right thing to do. Why did you do that? And what was important?
Listen, nothing would have made me happier than to not have thrown that rally. I didn't wake up, and say at the beginning of 2021 that this is what I want to accomplish this year. But nobody else was doing it. Or if they were doing it, they were doing it in a way that I thought needed addressing. The largest Jewish leaders, I think, were a little bit paralyzed by fear. I hate to say that, but I think that there were several fears going on. Because I saw it when the bombs were dropping on Israel, in Tel Aviv, in Sderot, all over the place, and Israel is being attacked nonstop in the press, in the halls of Congress for defending itself, as she has for so long. I just couldn't believe that there were these fears, and there was fear of our congregation isn't really together, our people aren't really with us on this. What will they think? And was there a fear of losing funding in there? I don't know. I don't want to say that, but there was definitely fear that the people weren't with them, and there was fear of failure. That if we try and we don't generate 250,000 people, then everybody is going to know we're weak. But you know what, Russell? The conclusion I came to is that the biggest fear and the biggest failure is not to even try. If you don't even try, you've already failed out of the gate. And I'm a big believer, you ask about investments and good strategies. I think that you also learn by trying. And if, God forbid, you make a mistake, just don't make a lethal mistake. You take these experiences and you learn what to do better for next time. And we have this fear of trying. We have this fear of trying new things. But I made this vow, and I said, you know what? If nobody else is doing it, whoever the first group is that calls for a rally in Washington, D.C. in support of the Jewish people, I'm going to get involved, and I'm going to do whatever I can to help. And that's how it unfolded. And there was a lot to fix because, well, we can go further on it, but there were a lot of the standard mistakes you might expect to be made through no fault of the organizers that we really had to dig in and address, primarily revolving around partisan politics in the United States.
But the partisan politics in the United States, and I don't mind unpacking it here as well. I've talked about it before. I think that you're kind of touching on it. The organized Jewish world, I'm going to use Zionism and the organized Jewish world, there is a pride fear. Zionism is part of who we are. We're connected to this land of Israel, ancestral land of our people. If you take even the issues, the Holocaust, would there have been? I mean, it's a great theological question. Is that would there have been a Holocaust if there was an Israel? And I think that most people will answer no, there wouldn't have been. And if we were an organized Jewish people in 1939. When Theodor Herzl was trying to come up with this group of people to repurchase the land of Israel, if we would have purchased a little more land in 39 and 31 and in 40, would there have been a land of Israel? And so there would have been an opportunity to save millions of Jews. But it takes organized Jewish world to kind of get out of its way in a way and to come unified. And from the Soviet Jewry movement to the Zionist movement, which is all a connector, that there's a pride.
There's no better gift to give or receive than one that can connect you with nature and your homeland. JNF has made it super easy for you to order your tree certificate online. Just go to jnf.org/trees, pick which special occasion it's for, whether a birth, bar mitzvah, just order your tree online and let's get planting. Every tree counts. As a memorial to a loved one, as a tribute for a special occasion, as a link to your heritage, as a link to the land of Israel, to help the environment and reduce your carbon footprint. Every tree counts.
So I'm talking to somebody who's on the inside and the outside. You're in the inside of the world because you're part of the world. You're on the outside because you're not part of the organized Jewish community and the head of an organization. Give us some investment pointers. If you were coming into our company and you wanted to get investors, guys, you need to look and what do you need to do to kind of make some corrections?
I love that question. Well, the first thing I want to say is it's impossible to speculate on could the Shoah have been avoided if there were a state of Israel at the time. But one thing I can tell you for sure, now that the state of Israel is here, we can feel very secure that there will never again be a Holocaust because she exists to defend the Jewish people, and that is her purpose. So I feel very confident in saying that. What I would say is you have many leaders that I think are looking to their followers to get a sense of are they with me or not if I stand up for Zionism. And I think that many of them know that the right thing is to stand up for Zionism. But what I will tell you from my conversations with many people at the staff and working level in many of these organizations, and also people who are not in these organizations, there is a widespread grassroots desire to see Jewish leadership stand up without any qualifications for the right of the Jewish people to exist in peace and security, not only in the United States, but also in Israel. And that is there.
See, and I believe you, and I think that as you come into our Zionist studios and these shows that we're having on Conversations of Zionism, from progressives to right-wing to people that haven't been, quote, activist in that, but became activist, and we're finding it from younger to older, that people are looking to say, you know what? Show me the pride, kind of show me a little bit of a winning attitude, and I want to join the winning team. And we, as too much in the organized Jewish world, have talked about the defeat and oy vey, and not.
No, we're on the back foot.
Right.
We're on the back foot because I think that American Jews have also become very enamored with our identity as successful Americans. And there is a school of thought in this country that, deals with victimization and how are we going to help everybody who's suffering. And Israel, thank God, is strong, and Israel, thank God, is secure. And Israel is overall winning. Its economy is growing, and it's, with the Abraham Accords, we now have peace within reach with a number of nations we thought we would never have before. And I think that there is just a piece of leadership, particularly in certain sections of American thinkers, American Jewish thinkers, that are, more obsessed with looking for signs of everything that we're doing wrong, because we're in this moment of deep introspection in this country, a deep introspection that's led by legitimate causes, which has to do with the history of racism in this country, but that has expanded to looking for suffering everywhere and, always being very quick to issue judgment on who's right and who's wrong. And that's the environment that we're in at the moment.
And you use the word Israel's strength, and I love it, because it's something that it's not necessarily what many organizations in the Jewish world love to talk about. It's always Israel, the brink of annihilation. And how can you be helping Israel if it's strong? We have to kind of, it's not what we were raised on. We were raised on the ingathering of exiles. Well, there aren't any. Okay, more Jews are making Aliyah from North America than anywhere else in the world. Well, that's not the narrative that we were raised on. So the strength of Israel becomes almost a problematic. It's a sad piece because, again, I'm going to go to your family and your father who talked about, that we're not a silent people. We never should be a silent people, which means strength. So how do we make that all part of the narrative?
I think it comes down to why we do things. If the only reason we ever do things is because we're giving tzedakah, we're helping our poor cousins who are in danger and can't help themselves. Look, I'm not saying that that's wrong. That's one way to look at the world, but I think about it differently. We need to be helping Israel because it's the right thing to do. And it's a muscle that you have to exercise when Israel is doing well, because you want that muscle strong for when Israel is not doing well. And we know from our long experience that there are times where the Jewish people do well on this planet, and there are times where we don't do so well. It's inevitable. We always go through ups and downs. And we have to exercise that muscle. It has to become part of our muscle kinesthetics, our body memory. We help Israel and our brothers and sisters over there because they are family and because it's the right thing to do. And half of the Jewish people live in Israel. And are we not going to do things that support half of our family?
So you talk about your growing up. You're now a parent. We have future grandchildren, children yet unborn. Give us some inspirational thoughts about what you think you have to do and what is that formula that for you, because it'll resonate to our guests out there, but for you, what is that formula of inspiration that you want to take from what you didn't learn or you didn't accept to what you want to be able to teach?
Well, I'll tell you two things, Russell. I'll tell you, first of all, the most important thing I think I did in my life. And I'm going to tell you the most important job that I think I have right now. The most important thing I did in my life is that I produced a grandson for my father with enough time for him to enjoy, and a granddaughter as well. And that he got to have nachas from his two grandkids for several years before he sadly passed is probably the most significant thing I accomplished in my life. Put everything else to the side. And I did it with a beautiful wife that I'm very fortunate to have. The most important job that I have, it's not investment, it's not fintech entrepreneurship, it's not even, thinking about Jewish organizing and what that could mean. It's davening with my son every morning. He goes to a non-Jewish school, but we wear tefillin every single morning before he goes off to school. It's making sure that at the Shabbos dinner table, not only do we sing Shalom Aleichem, we also sing Eshes Chayil, because we didn't sing that when I was growing up. And we do Birkat HaMazon, and my kids know when shul is happening and how you're supposed to be at shul and what you're supposed to do there and have a sense of Israel because I bring them there. The most important job that I have right now is to pass on this sense of Jewish identity to my children. And if I got nothing else right, this is how I feel I'll be measured.
So you as an unbelievable personality in your own self, which has the heritage and DNA from a family who we all admired, respected, and honored. And so I hope, and I know you will, is you'll stand up at those rallies. Mm-hmm. If there's 5 people, and when there's 250,000 people, because it's a constant voice that is needed in our community. And so I thank you for being that voice. I want you to share kind of one dream that you may have for us as a Jewish community, that if you're looking in 25 years, what do you hope that with Israel, the American Jewish community diaspora, that you would want to see?
First of all, I want to thank you, Russell. It's been great to have this conversation. I want to comment on what you said about the standing up. You know, my father had a quote where he said, "The reason you shout, even if no one is listening, is you do it for yourself, because you know it's the right thing to do. It's the only way to prevent yourself from going crazy, is at least you know you did what you could." And I take that vision and I take that thought a lot with me, because sometimes I think of him. And, you know, if he were watching me, how would he feel about what I'm doing? Forget everybody else, just how would he feel? Am I doing what I can? I've been blessed with, you know, so many decades on this planet. I've been blessed with the business success to have the opportunity to help where I can, my community, with my time, with my energy. How dare I not use those things? What right do I have to not use those assets? And my vision, if I had to think about it, we're always going to have disagreements within the Jewish community. You know, you go back forever, you go back to biblical times, there were disagreements on go left, go right. We're a nation that loves to challenge leadership, and we're a nation that loves to ask questions. So we have to find a way to not resent the other when somebody disagrees with us. If I'm on the right side of partisan politics, or I have a more conservative viewpoint, I have to get myself into the mindset where I am grateful that I have passionate social justice activists on the left side of the American political spectrum who feel so deeply about helping people, who stand up for universalism. I have to see that as a God-given strength and an asset, and believe that those people are not out there to demolish my point of view. They're there because they've been given certain gifts and certain perspectives. And how can I find a way to make that constructive back into our dialogue? And similarly, if I'm sitting on the left and I look at somebody on the right and I say, how dare they still have a mechitza? Or how dare they, vote for a candidate who's prioritizing Israel, whatever the crime of the day is. I would hope that someone on that side can begin to say, wow, if we didn't have Jews who stood up for conservative values and made sure that some remnants, some threads of the way Judaism was practiced 1,000, 2,000 years ago, 200 years ago, continues unadulterated, is important to us. If it weren't for the fact that some people are willing to put their lives on the line for Israel and their reputations on the line for the Jewish nation, boy, we would be weaker and smaller. My hope and my prayer is that we can find a way to see the positive in these things within each other and not always have it be, a full-on battlefield.
Thank you for being part of our conversation, and I just want to tell you, the words continue from generation to generation. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you, Russell, and I hope we get to continue this on many other occasions.